Okay, welcome to today's video where I'm actually going to start talking about post plants a bit more and like what the positions, like what defines a good post plant position versus a bad one, what factors go into a post plant position as well. So I've actually come up with 3 different factors which can be basically you can score on those and then have a collected like average, right? So first up is peak availability. So it's like a case of when you're in the post plant position, so let's say big box for example. I'm going to start with this because I feel like big box is probably the best position on this bomb site. So if you're at big box, you can hold tunnels like this, fine. You're holding the right hand peak, they swing left, so you have a slight advantage. You can go out this and peek the window, and you can get the run through door. So you can actually easily take a single fight there, single fight here, and a single fight here. So that's actually phenomenal, right? You're able to take 3 different peaks without actually taking multiple at the same time. So that's actually a huge advantage because in a post plant situation, you're ideally being able to cover one of the areas, or one of the choke points, as it were, where these CTs will be coming in. Second up is bomb plant visibility, which is what a case of now, okay, from your position, can you see the bomb? Because, for example, on the A site, pit is fantastic if the bomb is planted for long, but otherwise, not that good, right? And a single smoke could ruin your day. Whereas big box right here, you can see default, you can see double stack, and then you can see under window or behind back block as well, because those are probably the most common plants anyway. And then there's also the case of utility susceptibility, as I called it. So that's the case of, are you playing in a position that actually gets covered by utility very often? So obviously people like to do their flashes over, they go over like that, they smoke tunnels, there's sometimes a molly towards back plat. And then at big box it's kind of difficult to get the Molotov into. So I think the only lineup I roughly know is by just trying to like literally just run it off the wall like that. And that's not a perfect lineup because you have to expose yourself quite a bit to get it through the door like that. So that's why big box is probably what I'd consider a 10 out of 10 in this bomb site at least. Obviously in terms of like per map there may be differences, but I think if we have, let's say 10 post plant spots, all of them could be in a 1 to 10 and each of them could be a single rating themselves. So if I'm saying this is a 10, I'm going to then go to my second favourite, which will probably just be, technically, it's either car or tunnels, but I'm going to say it was tunnels for this one. So tunnels of course is a good one, however, of course, as I said, this tends to get smoked. So you do get owned by that a bit, but the main thing is that you're able to actually peek clear tunnels. You can clear a whole avenue and then be like, okay, tunnels is 100% clear. And as soon as you've cleared tunnels, you can actually change and play like this, or you can actually just play against the double stack like that, anti-flash. There's a few different possibilities, right? And I think that's one of the main things. And of course, the one plant, the visibility, you can see towards this double stack one. You might need to swing out like this to actually get the full view of it. And then default you can see, but obviously under window you cannot. Worth noting, you probably wouldn't go window if you planted underneath window because obviously, as I just said, you cannot see it. So I think I'll give tunnels an 8 for that, in that case. And then I'm actually going to go for car next. So car, again, the same thing as a utility, where people tend to, because it's a very easy lineup, even if this is smoked, like they'll be like, okay, they'll arrive, and then it's like, jump, you see the corner, you're like, well, I'm nading car. And if you're car, you're just like, well, they've double naded me, I'm still alive though, they probably won't expect me here, that sort of thing, and you're already like 20 HP. So in terms of nades, it's not great. Sometimes you get Molotov obviously as well. But for flashbangs, it's pretty good because you do just sit here looking at the floor to make sure your head doesn't peek over. And then peak availability, with the doors being reversed like this, you can see a hell of a lot more from here. So you could argue that's a positive or a negative depending on the circumstance you're in as a post plant. But I personally think it's a bit more of a positive because if you hear their flashes bombarding over, when you peek, chances are you might have a line of them here and just a nice easy blitz through them. And then the same goes for them running out window. And then car, you're holding the right hand peak, they have to swing left. So again, another advantage for you. Of course, you're in a bit of a choke point, so they probably will just come around spraying for the most part. But you might be able to get the first headshot. Obviously, this is a T-side player, so you might have an AK. So I'm going to give car, I'll give this one a 9 purely because it's kind of difficult sometimes to get rid of the player. So now I'm actually going to go to default. So I actually think this is really underrated. So if you were to have you know, the trifecta of a player behind big box, tunnels, and here, you probably have one of the best possible triangle setups, really. So default may not seem like the glitz and glamour position that I'm going to make it out to be, but if you think about how you can set anti-flash, people don't really check this spot that much either. They're much more focused on that, and it's like, that's a really wide peak. If you're in 4x3, you do not see the player there. Like that's not visible. So if you set default, you're able to just go like that. You should be setting anti-flash anyway, for the most part. Somebody should be playing peeking, kind of. So that'll probably be the big box player in this circumstance. They're probably like that, and there's like flashes coming over, they can run up against the box and hide. And then as soon as the player at default shoots across to here, big box can swing, that's two people fighting the same person. If he dies towards the window run out, tunnel can actually face and fight that as well. Yeah, there's a lot of easy crossfires that can be created off of that simple 3-man setup there. So that's why I'm thinking default is like a 7-6 sort of rating. There is of course back plat. As I mentioned though, very often you get Molotov'd out. So utility wise, that's probably one of the worst, next to car in terms of utility. And then peak availability, it's still not that fantastic. Like, I mean, tunnel's fine, you can hold the tunnel completely. A door, you've got a good run out, and then window, you can see the same. And you're actually able to take single fights like that. So it's pretty good for that. But bomb plant, you can't see default, you have to swing out way far. Double stack, it's a bit tough. Like, this wall's very hit and miss depending on where they're actually like landing down, because as you see, this is lower than this area here. So I think this is probably still like a 4, maybe a 5. But it's because it's like, you do have some advantages, but as soon as you get Molotov'd, you are done. Like, you have to somehow get out of here, and it's very difficult to get out of there, because if they Molotov and their player peeks tunnel at the same time as window, you're probably just going to get absolutely blitzed from both sides. Next up, I'm actually going to go for the above or just outside window. So I think this is a really underrated. So this is the same, really. I'll give this the same rating. Actually, no, this is better than default, because you're able to actually push out off of a flashbang. So you can actually play slightly more aggressive, or the surprise aggression more than anything, right? So let's say you've got the same setup I said, big box, tunnel, outside window. So your big box player can cover the window for you, you've got the run out the door, and then if things, you hear them pulling nades, somebody, do you have a flashbang? And it's like, oh yeah, I do have a flash. Flashing over door, and it's like, okay. You hear the flash pop and you just swing out, you kill 2 people, you die. But it's like, okay, that's a 2-for-1 in a post plant, that's fantastic. Like, you've done very well there. And that has disrupted their retake and probably got rid of some of the grenades they have, or made it so there's only grenades, and then the people who are throwing the grenades need to go in off their own flashes, which is much more difficult, of course. So I think that that's why window is such a good one, especially because you're not going to get Molotov. You might get grenaded by mistake, just because some people do this like grenade, thinking it'll land like perfectly default, but it's still like way off. You might take some collateral damage off that, but otherwise, yeah, you're pretty good. And then peak availability is the same as default, so it's arguably better. Then there's of course under window, which, you know, you can play in the corner like that, or you can jump up. I'm personally a fan of using the jump up and then doing this. If your teammates are able to cover you for window, it's actually a pretty damn good spot. But like I said, utility is the other issue. A lot of people tend to do this like Molotov where it like lands just down there, and then you get forced out, whether it's immediately or slightly late depending on the Molotov spread as well. So utility you tend to get absolutely screwed over by, but otherwise, yeah, not grenades or like Molotovs, but flashbangs you should be okay, because you've got a lot of area to cover into, right? So I think that's probably like a 3, maybe a 2. Platform, like this whole area, like this whole line here. In CSS, with the doors the other way around, this is very, very good, of course, because there was no Molotovs either, so you could play a lot more areas without much of a consequence. But I think this area is no longer as good as it used to be. So most of the flashbangs will absolutely destroy that area, just because you don't have much cover. You have to then go behind big box, and then you're essentially playing big box at that point. So if you're dedicating to this, sure, you're able to like single out targets the same way big box can, you're just missing the cover of the big box, which is why it's significantly worse. Like, utility wise, it's worse as well due to that flashes, like I just said. Molotovs and HEs not so much, but flashes of course are the main issue for that area. And I think that actually they're okay. Well, the last one I'll mention will be double stack, right? So this again is slightly awkward because usually when people play here, it's because they've got stuck there, right? So you've just planted the bomb. You already know they're outside. Door isn't smoked. Very difficult for you to relocate. I actually think it's a bit better. So if you ever play a covering tunnel, I'd hope you would if you're staying double stack. But if you ever play covering tunnels, just being on this ledge might make the difference for you, because if you see flashes coming over, you might be able to just swing out like that and then kill this player here, and then single out a bit more of a better run through, right? Because if they're running through door, it's very rare you see somebody do this as a peek. They always tend to go wide this way, and then if they don't get you on that wide swing, they have to then go close, and then it's like, okay, cat and mouse. Yeah, it's a bit of a coin toss at that point. So it's not a fantastic spot, but it is typically last resort, and that's why it's, you know, much further down on the scale. So just to run through it again, so big box best, tunnels, car, window/default are like the top 4 in my eyes, because if you're able to sync them together, they make for a very unbeatable combo, especially on this B-bomb site. Okay, so let's fly through to A then. So A site, bit of a different one. Okay, so B site's known as being a very hard site to retake. The B site, the B site's very hard to retake. The A site is a bit of a different scenario because there's a lot more open avenues. It's a bit, well, there's no like choke points either. So let's go through the actual plant spots first. So defaults, short plant is a traditional one. Default against boxes, there's the long plant, there's the absolute unholy plant on top of the box, the safe plant. Okay, so the main thing that I'll consider, right, is that long will be this area. So we're counting this from, you know, these lines up to here, right? So this is long in my eyes, because we're then going to say this is pit, like that whole bit is pit. So long, pretty okay post plant spot for most of them. Like utility wise, you're probably going to get flashed. I think it's very hard to dodge any flashes on this actual site, unless you've got multiple players where one of you is able to play anti-flash and not peek anything, or you take the risk, of course, by not peeking, and then, yeah, it's very bold, but either way. But of course, this spot here, you're going to get flashed. You're not going to get HE'd or Molotov'd off. You might get smoked on the corner, like just like here or something. But the main thing is, for bomb plants, you can only really see default, and then long plant, and then up against this box as well, and obviously on top. If it's planted here, you might be in a better shot, of course, but you have to go wide, and then, yeah, it's a bit awkward because you have to spam through the box. So that's why this spot isn't perfect, but it could be better in an actual 3-man setup or 2-man setup, depending on where your other teammate is. So I'll then go through. I'll give that one. Well, let's say we'll give it a 4 or a 5. I think that's middling, where it's like not bad, but it's not great, because you are in no man's land as well. There's no cover. So next up is pit. Of course, yeah, if you're the pit player, you need to make sure nobody comes along, and then otherwise you are playing that last man plant. So you have to basically have it planted here, 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 or top of there. Otherwise you are useless. You have to spam through the box for this one, and then otherwise you are just losing the round if you're. Like, I don't know what you're doing if you're going long with the plant here. Or, like, pit, even. Like, you're basically guaranteeing to lose the round in that case. So, utility-wise, you can get smoked off on the bomb, right? So they'll do, like, a smoke on top of the bomb. It'll just land there, and it's like, oh, well, I have to spam through the smoke. Even though it's not that difficult. Also, the golden rule of spamming a smoke, if there is somebody planting it, do not spray. Just tap like 3-4 bullets on the same spot, move on to the next bit, move on to the next bit. Because an AK, to the body, it's 4 shots. Even with capital helmet, it's 4 shots. You do not need to spam, like, as much as you think you do. Just do nice controlled tap, 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 tap. Right? So, yeah, you just need to make sure you hit the same line 4. You could hit 5 times just to make sure, in case one of the bullets strayed off a tiny bit, but that'll be much more reliable than actually spraying those smokes. So again, you'll get smoked off, and then it becomes a bit of a unfortunate spray battle through the smoke, essentially. And then usually when they've smoked it, there's somebody peeking on the floor as well, so you're getting influenced by others as well. So I think this one will be given a 5. We'll stick with long being a 4 as like individual spots. If you're in a 1v1 or 1v2, this is an incredibly bold play really to make, but chances are it probably pays off. especially if it's late in the round, because there might not be a smoke in play. So we're going to go with car next. So this is the worst. This is just the worst, right? People get drawn to car because it's like cover, but frankly, this car is made of just hay or something. It just goes right through it for near full damage. You know, when they shoot through it, your blood splatters on the wall. Sometimes you get grenaded fully as well. The only advantage you really have is that you're able to like hide from one view and then take another fight there. But as soon as you peek this way, you've got so many different views, it makes it not worth it. And then utility-wise, it's like, okay, yeah, you're able to duck behind the car, but that's still not great. Like, I'm giving that 1-on-1. I don't think I need to explain much more. You're just going to get spammed. You're going to get owned. It's not great, right? So then we've got a ramp as well. So I really like a ramp. I think it's a pretty damn good spot. You need to obviously combine it with either somebody at long, or you just take the risk and you cover long yourself. CT is more commonly pushed up, or you'd know they're coming up, right? Because they do like that usual flash on the window, right? Lands right on the window, they run up with it, and then you should know they're coming anyway. So as soon if you're holding long, it's like, okay, I've heard them CT, and then boom, boom, boom. And the other thing is, of course, if you have somebody at long, you can then take this headshot battle, which is lovely. You've got an AK, one-shot headshot, easy peasy. So A ramp, I think that's a good 8, maybe 9 to be honest. I think that's probably one of the best spots. And then of course there is playing default if you are a maniac, which I don't think I need to explain too much about the issues with that one, especially when you see people just whacking nades onto that bomb site and just owning you. It's pretty straightforward. You peak availability, like fine. You know, if you're stuck here, you're stuck here. The same thing as the double stack on B. You kind of need to either get out or peek something and then get to a different position. Also, do not go here. This is another horrible spot to be in. So, the A site probably gets a 3, maybe a 2. Like, I gave Car a 1, so probably a 2 for that. I'm not even going to bother explaining why this is bad, because that's just flat out, you know, they're not going to expect you, sure, but chances are they're flashing over and it's like, well, there's a head there, bang, you're dead. Like, you're not going to sit anti-flash here because there's a chance that you're going to catch them off guard peeking. So that's the only chance you get, really. Especially when sometimes in your post plant, you're smoking short anyway. So it's like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't sit here too much because they'll flash through the smoke. I don't even get that early opportunity. So there is also Gandalf, of course. So this is more to do with a plant where it's there or there. However, the issue with this is, of course, it's easily spammable. And as well as that, if they're actually getting to the bomb site and they know you're there, they might use a Molotov towards that location anyway. Because it's not too uncommon for somebody to be playing there if it's a short plant and they've retaken, or if they retook the site through CT or long, they probably are waiting, they'll smoke short, and then they'll probably Molotov Gandalf, or they'll do Molotov short and then check Gandalf fully. So we'll give this one a 3. I think there's not many positives for that. Then of course we're now getting towards the catwalk. So this area, if you have somebody on short already, I think this is a pretty damn good spot. Of course, as a CT, it's really difficult because you have an M4, you're like, okay, you have to hit 2 shots on each of these players when you're coming up. And it's really, really annoying when there's a player like this and then they keep going, you know, they keep just crouching up and down. And then they keep killing a teammate every like 5 bullets when they do it. And it's like, well, I can't trade you. It's like, it's really difficult. Of course, the issue is, if your short player dies, you are doomed. The flashbang that lands in the window that I showed earlier, you know, that will get you completely. And there's not much time for you to dodge that either, so you're either sitting anti-flash like this, which you are an absolute psychopath, I think, if you're just willing to sit in the corner, like staring at it. So I think it's a good spot, and then for plant-wise, if it's here, of course, that's the only reason you probably are playing there. You need to make sure you keep most of the site for as long as possible. Of course, a long plant is the same. You could be playing, I mean, that's more Gandalf or short, I guess, but I suppose this area is just as doable. So I think this one, I'll give it a 6, but you have to have a player short, which of course is the final post-plant spot that I'm going to go through. So let's think about the plants available. So there is short plant, there is this absolute wacky CT plant that people used to do in CSS a lot, long plant as well, and then it's like, if it's plant a default, you don't have much of a choice other than throwing grenades, which that's not too reliable. But then there's peak availability. So you actually get same way reason as tunnel. This area basically. This is basically the same as tunnel. So you might get smoked off every time you're on short post plant. Same thing that happens in tunnel. But you are able to clear out an entire area, which great. That's really good. And if you're able to clear it early enough, you can jump through CT and actually kill some of the players going up CT in the back, and then run back to short already, and make that a bit of a chaotic round for them to think about. So, in terms of peak availability, like that's pretty damn good. However, of course, the utility, as I said, you're going to get smoked out, you might get naded, you might get molotoved. If they're coming short as well, yeah, it's kind of difficult to make sure that you're able to actually cover this one, just because there's too many chances where they spam utility around these corners. Especially, like, they might nade that and then throw an absolute wacky flash, which doesn't even go around the corner, but they'll actually still run with it. So, I think for short, it's probably a 7. But I think you need to be synced with a player on Catwalk, perhaps, a player Goose, a player Ramp, something like that, where you're not too one-dimensional. Right? So same thing as Tunnel, where as on its own, not too great, but when it comes to being a part of a team, it's a lot better. So I think that's it for these two sites. Of course, if there's anything I missed, comment below, but I just thought this might be an interesting one to go through, where people can actually think about where they go on a post plant, like think about it more, instead of just, brain AFK, I go this way after planting bomb. And it's like, why are you doing this? You planted short, why have you gone long? It's like that sort of thing. So anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.